Uh, this reasoning forms the basis for the theory put forth by contemporary utilitarian Peter Singer, who claims that the capacity for suffering is what warrants consideration of animal interests. In his book Animal Liberation, contemporary utilitarian Peter Singer argues that equality applies to humans as well as animals, but that equal consideration does not mean equal treatment. For Singer, what makes animals deserving of moral consideration is not their intelligence or their aptitude, but their ability to suffer. He argues that our inattentiveness to animal suffering constitutes a form of speciesism, a prejudice on a par with sexism and racism. Singer argues that our eating habits and our practices of animal experimentation are morally wrong. Singer begins by examining the indefensibility of sexism and racism. Quote, "Although humans differ as individuals, there are no difference between races and sexes as such. From the mere fact that a person is black or a woman, we cannot infer anything about that person's intellectual or moral capacities. This, it may be said, is why sexism and racism are wrong." In other words, restricting liberty or according less status to a person on the basis of their sex or race is wrong because neither sex nor race are informative concepts. Moreover, argues Singer, even if there were inequalities in ability across races or sexes, this would not be a defensible basis for political or moral inequality. Quote, "The claim to equality does not depend on intelligence, moral capacity, physical strength, or similar matters of fact. Equality is a moral idea, not an assertion of fact. There is no logically compelling reason for assuming that a factual difference in ability between two people justifies any difference in the amount of consideration we give to their needs and interests. The principle of equality of human beings is not a description of an alleged actual equality among humans. It is a prescription of how we should treat humans." So Singer is saying, look, when we believe in equality for human beings, it's not because we believe all human beings are equal. They aren't. And that inequality doesn't fall along racial lines or gender lines, though some differences can. Not along race lines, really, because that's a social construct, not a biological entity in the way that biological sex is. But really, we're not equal, even within categories. One person doesn't have the same array of assets and drawbacks as the next. So that we believe in equality for human beings isn't based on any actual equality. So that animals fail to be equal to human beings in relevant respects, he argues, shouldn't be a satisfactory rubric for making them an inferior moral being. Singer notes that this impartial consideration of interests is at the heart of utilitarianism. Jeremy Bentham, progenitor of the hedonistic calculus, asserted that each person is to count for one and for no more than one. The interests of one being are to be given equal consideration to that of any other being, regardless of their endowments or handicaps. As an implication of this principle, we are to show concern for others on the basis of how they are affected by what we do. Quote, "Concern for the well-being of a child growing up in America would require that we could teach him to read. Concern for the well-being of a pig may require no more than we leave him alone with other pigs in a place where there is where there is adequate food and room to run freely. But the basic element, the taking into account of the interests of the being, whatever those interests may be, must, according to the principle of equality, be extended to all beings, black or white, masculine or feminine, human or non-human." Having made a case against sexism and racism, Singer asserts that the same principles of unequal consideration are at work in our treatment of animals, and he calls this treatment speciesism, a prejudice or attitude of bias towards the interests of members of one's own species and against the members of another species. Singer notes that some philosophers have attempted to identify that which makes human beings decidedly human, and thus what gives us our value, but have failed. Elsewhere in philosophy, This failure is called, quote, the problem of non-paradigm humans.